My name is Lana Belisle Bevans. I was a 13-year-old student of Austin High School in Stand Creek Town. I was standing on its veranda and looking out to sea and wondering about the hurricane. We lived in a 2-story wooden house that was recently renovated with a small grocery shop in part of the downstairs. That night, my grandparents, family, and neighbors came to our house to shelter from the hurricane. The winds and rain started to pick up after the shop closed. It became powerful very fast. I heard a loud noise, and when I looked out, our next door neighbor's house was completely blown away. A short while later, a 2-story house across the street collapsed. The wind was howling and getting very strong. We had some board windows and those started to pop out. My dad and cousins got some big rope and tried to tie things down. The situation became worse very fast, so we all had to go downstairs. Luckily, we had a staircase. Then the water started coming up. We put our grandmother and the small children on the dinner table. The water kept rising. All the goods from the shop was floating off the shelves. The table capsized and everyone ended up in the water. The water came up to my neck. We all moved to the staircase. At this point, we noticed that our roof had blown off. It seemed as if the hurricane wasn't going to end. We stayed on the staircase huddled together until morning came. When everything eased, I ventured upstairs and looked out. Most of the houses were destroyed and piled in the street. It was a devastating scene. The night after the hurricane, my parents didn't want to stay in the house, so we went to Joyland Theatre and spent the night sitting up with our feet in the mud. When we went back home, all our groceries were stolen and mud was everywhere. Helicopters came and brought bread, and we had to stand in line to get it. Tickets were then given out to get ration, and we had to catch long lines many days to get food. We lost a whole family, a granduncle, his wife, daughter, and all their children. That experience of Hurricane Hattie on 31st October 1961 will always be etched in my memory as one of the most devastating hurricanes to hit Belize. We lived on Cedar Street in Stand Creek Town. That time it was Stand Creek Town, it wasn't Danbury yet. That was on the south side of Stand Creek, right beside it. St. Vincent is the main street and our house was on the next, on the other street. Well, only the boys went out to see the dead bodies, they didn't let the girls go out. And they had to be careful because of the debris and the nails, that they didn't get nail job. And a lot of people had to get tetanus shot who were exposed to that scenario. It's just that I remember me and my brother, we stood up at the corner of the house and all I was thinking about was when the water was coming up, how I was going to survive the hurricane. I wasn't thinking about perishing at all. My thoughts were on surviving. And it's a good thing we had the staircase because that is an inner part of the house, right?
Yeah.
So it was protected, so when we went there, at least we were protected from the elements. And I know a man in our house wanted to go out. He wanted to say, I'm not going to stay here because I'm going to die. But you couldn't move because the water outside, the water inside, the doors couldn't push up, out or in, right? So you just had to stay there and take your licks. But it was really, really terrible. And it was for months afterwards before things started to normalize. Well, at those days we used to go to the river and fetch water. The river wasn't too far from our house, so the water wouldn't have been. Well, I guess it was flooded at first, but eventually we used to boil the water right after the hurricane.
Could you recall how long it took you guys to get back electricity?
No. At that age I wasn't aware of all those things, right? But I know we didn't have beds to sleep on. My dad put some benches and some board across, and I guess maybe a sheet or something, and that's the way we slept until everything dried out. But the mud was the thing everywhere, was full of mud. I had to shovel out the mud. And our parents had to cook on the open fire hearth, till things got a little bit normalized.